Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, Em and Jay, and today we're talking about the third episode of Netflix's Masters of the Universe Revelation. In this episode, they start their quest to Subternia, which is this world's version of hell, and along the way they pick up a few allies and familiar faces, for better or for worse. But the show's flaws are still apparent, in both the writing and the marketing, like how they pretended that He-Man wouldn't be sidelined and claiming that it was literally all about He-Man, but what they really meant was that he would appear in Flashbacks, and the group would continuously talk about him, even to the detriment of their own characters. Then again, the team behind this show don't seem to have a good grasp of these characters to begin with, even though they claim to have a superfan on board. Teela and Evil-lyn are grossly mischaracterized. That's been apparent for Teela from the beginning of this show, but on top of making Teela an unreasonable weirdo who hates magic despite knowing that it's essential for the survival of the universe, they also reduced her and Evil-lyn to being little more than cheerleaders for the men in their lives. Evil-lyn in particular gets it bad. They stripped away all of her drive and motivation from the original, making it that the only reason she ever does anything is because she's in love with Skeletor and she's doing it for him. It even starts to feel like the only reason why she was evil was because of Skeletor's influence. It's not even just the women. I have no idea what they were thinking with the way they treat Beastman in this show. He ends up joining their crew, but is a complete shadow of his former self, and only joins for Evil-lyn. It's weird, especially considering the fact that the press around this show went on and on about how much more progressive it is than the original. It's not. This episode begins with a flashback, so they can say, see, He-Man's in this episode, it's all about He-Man. I guess it also establishes Merman, he exists, but I'm also really salty about this scene because it was used as promotion for the show, you know, to make it look like He-Man was in this series and that it was closer to the original 80s cartoon. They really had to sell that bait and switch. The scene is actually just Teela telling Andra about her old days working with He-Man. She, He-Man, and Man-at-Arms stopped Skeletor and Merman, and He-Man makes a corny joke about defeating Skeletor, about him being all wet. Andra stops the flashback to make fun of He-Man's sense of humor. Teela agrees and says that He-Man had the sense of humor of a teenager who didn't get out much. But where do they have room to judge He-Man's sense of humor? In the last episode, Andra made a condom joke at a really inappropriate time, as a woman was explaining that this magical artifact is culturally significant to her and her people, and how they felt lost without it. I bet He-Man would have had more tact. Then Evil-lyn interjects that He-Man was a goody-goody, and that Man-at-Arms was dangerous, and that she told everyone at Snake Mountain that he was the most dangerous man in Eternia, and the real threat. Okay, Evil-lyn, no one asked about your crush? Andra says she wants to meet Man-at-Arms because he made those cool underwater lasers, but then Evil-lyn starts lecturing her, saying she shouldn't get involved with dangerous men. She says she was interested in dangerous men in her youth, but don't bother because they'll never return your affection, and they're only in it for themselves. Andra just said she wanted to meet the guy who made the cool gadgets. Why is Evil-lyn suggesting she wants to date Teela's dad? This is awkward. She's also showing that she doesn't know anything about Man-at-Arms, stereotyping him as some jerk bad boy. He dedicated his life to fighting the forces of evil. He's actually a hero, not that Evil-lyn would know anything about that. But as they walk through the woods, we see they're being pursued by someone. They make it mysterious, and I'm not really sure what the purpose of that is, aside from drama, I guess. But it's just Beastman. Why bother sneaking around? It cuts to a long line of civilians who are waiting to fill up their cups at a fountain that has a little bit of magic left. Emphasis on a little bit. Man-at-Arms is at the front of the line, although he's being mysterious and wearing a cloak. Unfortunately, the guy behind him spills his cup of water when he trips on a rock, which angers the crowd, so one guy approaches him, prompting Duncan to intervene. Unfortunately, Triclops and his silly cult show up, calling everybody heretics and demanding a human sacrifice, and they blast the fountain, destroying one of the few magical deposits left in Eternia. Duncan manages to take out most of the cult members, but one of them sucker punches him, and causes him to almost drop the cup of water, but he manages to save it before it's too late. Meanwhile, Trapjaw fixates his lasers onto Man-at-Arms, but Teela and the others show up just in time, and Andra sneaks underneath the vehicle, shutting down the laser. So now that the cavalry has arrived, things are going well, until the cultists start wrapping them up in these cords. Triclops approaches Evil-lyn, telling her it's time to be merged with Motherboard, but then Beastman shows up and makes quick work of the cult, and gets his hands on Triclops. He says he has no problem with Beastman, but Beastman insists that by by attacking Evil-lyn, Triclops makes an enemy out of him. Beastman's entire character in this show revolves around his devotion to Evil-lyn. Since when was Beastman infatuated with Evil-lyn? Here he's totally at her beck and call, and I'm not sure where this is coming from, but the cults go on their way, and Teela tells the old-timer that she was impressed, not realizing that it's Duncan, and she isn't too happy when he reveals himself. He gets on his knees and begs her for forgiveness, for lying to her and keeping secrets, but Evil-lyn cuts him off because she's impatient. Duncan's obviously caught off guard seeing Evil-lyn with the group, even though they just fought a battle together, but Teela explains they need him to reforge the Sword of Power. Duncan has a pretty strange reaction to this, saying, "Oh, is that all?" He reminds her that he was banished and stripped of his rank, and part of that punishment includes being executed if he so much as welds two pieces of metal together. Yeah, that was pretty extreme. Where are the king and queen right now anyway? Are they doing anything to actually lead the people of Eternos? It would be nice to get an update from them. Anyway, Duncan says he has more important things to do than help save the universe, but his main priority is to get this enchanted water home. But back to the whole saving the universe thing, you'd think he'd be at least a little intrigued at the idea of getting the power sword back, so this whole post-apocalyptic hellscape can finally be done with, and he wouldn't have to wait in line forever just to get a cup of water. Not to mention dramatically improve the quality of life and people wouldn't be dying as much. Instead he just brushes it off and says he has his own priorities. What is it with characters in this show walking away from a chance to save the universe? I get he'd be upset about what happened with Prince Adam and being banished by the king, but again, chance to save the universe. Their personal problems don't come before that. The group heads to where Duncan's been living, and it turns out he's been taking care of Orko, who's really sick. He's dying because all the magic is leaving Eternia, and he's a magical creature, so magic users are the first to go. Evil-lyn admits that she's being affected too, as is the sorceress. As if that wasn't bad enough, it turns out he's also been banished from the palace by the king and queen after what happened with Adam, so Raydor and Marlena threw out their dying friend in his greatest time of need, all because of a secret that wasn't his to tell. I'm so disappointed with the characterization in this series. Evil-lyn cuts to the chase and asks Man-at-Arms if he'll help them, but Duncan dejectedly says his hero days are behind him. This is really odd because he's been taking care of Orko this whole time, and he sees the state he's in, not to mention what's become of Eternia, where people wait in long lines for magic water to slowly drip into cups, and they're attacked by roaming cultists. He'd really rather live like this and watch the world die instead of do something. This isn't Man-at-Arms. Then Teela has the absolute gall to ask him about his responsibilities to Eternia, as if she didn't abandon Eternia as soon as she was promoted to Man-at-Arms. Duncan says his duty was to the prince, and since he's dead, he no longer has any duty to the crown. But this mission is from the sorceress. So then Teela goes on this whole spiel about how she thought he changed, but he's the same broken old man who only cares about the royal family and not his own. And again, she has no room to talk because she turned her back on him too. They're interrupted by Roboto. In this continuity, Man-at-Arms built Roboto as a surrogate son. He gives this little speech about family being what you make of it, which is nice enough, but Duncan uses it to say that he can't abandon this new family he has, being himself Roboto and Orko. Isn't abandoning them not going on the quest, since they're all gonna die if they don't put the sword back together, and Orko's already dying? But Orko decides that he can abandon the family and wants to go on the quest. Teela and Evil-lyn object because he's too sick, but then he gives a speech to Teela saying that the best times of his life was when he was adventuring with his friends, and that's what he needs right now, and he promises he won't let them down like he used to. Honestly, I don't think he ever let them down. If he made mistakes, he would work to fix them. He's actually pretty resourceful and clever, and he even protected Duncan from Evil-lyn's attack in the first episode, so it's sad that he views himself as a screw-up, but that's actually just the opinion of the writer's room. Teela says that even if he does come, only Duncan knows how to forge the sword. I'm sure he can do it, but it's not like he forged it in the first place, and it's never been split apart before. And according to the comic tie-in, Troll and Magic was used to forge the sword, so maybe Orko would be helpful. But Roboto suggests that he might be able to forge the sword, since he has Duncan's memories. Duncan asks if he's a fool for suggesting to go with them. What about Orko? He didn't say anything about him going along. At least Roboto isn't dying. But Roboto says they must be a pair they're fools since his neural pathways are based on Duncan's. Duncan admits this is true and he decides to go along as well, but Teela stops him. She suggests Roboto goes with them and Duncan goes to Castle Grayskull to help protect the sorceress since she only has Cringer right now. Well, why doesn't Duncan go with them and Roboto can go protect the sorceress? Randor did say that if Duncan ever goes to Grayskull, he'll be executed, but he never said anything about Roboto. But Teela says that if her dad wants to make it up to her, that he'll go protect the sorceress. Personally, I think the writers just didn't want him to come on this quest. Duncan says he promised no more secrets, so there's one other thing he has to tell her, which I assume is the sorceress is her mother, but Evil-lyn stops him and says there's no more time for family drama, and they have to get going, so that's gonna have to wait. So the group that's on their way to heaven and hell is Teela, Evil-lyn, Andra, Orko, Roboto, and Beastman. There's no specific reason that Beastman is coming, it's just that he follows Evil-lyn around like a puppy dog, who can maul people, so at least that could be useful. But this is an extremely one-sided relationship. She doesn't seem to care for him at all, and he didn't contribute anything to this discussion. He spent the whole conversation sitting on the floor. So the team sets out on the Crystal Sea. On their way to the gate to Subternia, Evil-lyn and Teela start chatting. Also, Evil-lyn takes their helmet off and her hair just cascades down, totally perfect with no helmet hair at all. Nice to see she still has some magic left. They start reminiscing about the past. Evil-lyn teases Teela by saying she used to go on and on about He-Man. So Teela says that she used to go on and on about Skeletor. It's interesting how this is the second time this episode Evil-lyn has brought up men. I didn't peg her as the boy crazy type, but she says her devotion to Skeletor was just the result of her being a fool, because it blinded her to her own path, and that she could have been a master of the universe if she hadn't wasted her time with Skeletor, which is the exact opposite of Evil-lyn in the original show.
Why do you waste your time fighting for Skeletor?
I have no loyalty to Skeletor. It's his power I want. Someday, I'll seize it from him, and then all Eternia will feel my might.
You know I'll have to stop you.
I know you'll try.
They virtue signaled so much about how much more progressive this version is compared to the original, yet they made Evil-lyn's character revolve entirely around Skeletor. Same thing with Teela to He-Man. They acted like they came in and improved the characters. Ever heard of don't fix what isn't broken? Then they have the nerve to act like the rest of us are fake fans for not appreciating the way they treat these characters, when they themselves clearly have no understanding of their characterization to begin with. Which is ironic since they're the ones making this show and writing these characters, yet it seems like they didn't even try. Thanks a lot, guys. Anyway, Teela says that Evil-lyn should move on because Skeletor is dead, but she turns it around by saying Teela hasn't gotten over He-Man. Teela denies this, but who is she trying to fool, really? She's still as bitter as she was at the end of the first episode. Meanwhile, Andra is having a conversation with Orko. Orko says that he's been suffering memory loss because of his condition, so he recommends Andra keep a journal, because once the adventures are over, all that will be left are memories. Their journey comes to a sudden halt when they're attacked by Aquaticans. They're boarded, but they all just kind of stand around and don't really do anything to stop this. One of them grabs Evil-lyn, so Beastman smacks him away, but that's the extent of them fighting back. In the last episode, Teela and Andra infiltrated a cult and took them out, but all of a sudden they're helpless against Aquaticans with spears? Come on, guys, why is Beastman suddenly the most capable? Merman shows up and Evil-lyn demands he release them. Seriously? You're not even gonna try to fight back? None of them even attacked Beastman for fighting back. I know Orko's under the weather, but what's the rest of their excuses? They'll take on Triclops, Trapjaw, Blast Attack, and all the other Snake Mountain cult members, but this is overwhelming for them. Instead, Merman gets to monologue and have his big villain speech. Although ironically, he kind of has a point. He confronts Evil-lyn for abandoning him after Skeletor died, saying if they had teamed up, they could have ruled the universe together, with her on the land and him in the sea, and with no He-Man to stand in their way, so now he wants revenge, and this way she'll never be able to forget him again. I guess he doesn't know that Evil-lyn doesn't have any direction without Skeletor. Apparently, she was just a little lost girl after Skeletor died, and wasn't able to do anything until the sorceress asked her for help, unable to see she could have easily taken advantage of the power vacuum created by his death, at least for however long the universe can last without magic anyway. Instead, now it looks like she and the rest of them are going to be facing a watery grave, only for Man-at-Arms to show up out of nowhere and single-handedly take out Merman and his goons. I guess he followed them, but it does make the rest of them look really bad when they were just standing around and letting this happen, despite the fact that there were 6 of them, and Beastman proved they weren't that hard to take out. I don't know if they just wanted Duncan to have a cool moment, even though he already had one this episode. I just don't get why they had to nerf all the rest of them, except for Beastman again, who comes in at the end to restrain Merman. Why is Beastman the only one doing anything? But good for him, I guess. Teela's exasperated that he showed up, saying that he was supposed to go to Grayskull. She could at least thank him. It's not like she was doing anything to get them out of this situation. She was just standing there letting them be captured. Evil-lyn gives Merman an ultimatum: either take them to the gates of Subternia or rot in the sun. So he relents. They make it to the gate and release Merman, but before he leaves he gives a warning to Evil-lyn, saying the sea never forgets and neither does he. So now that Duncan has come all this way, he's gonna go all the way back. But Teela does hug him, so I guess they're on good terms now, finally. The group walks up to the gate and Evil-lyn opens it using the head of the Havoc staff. Why is there a gate to Subternia in the Crystal Sea? Kind of a random place. But they all head in, despite Teela offering them one last chance to back out. And that's where this episode ends. This series is trying really hard to be progressive, but ironically ends up taking multiple steps back. They took Teela and Evil-lyn, who are both powerful in their own right, and made them obsessed with Skeletor and He-Man, to the point where Teela gave up her career, and Evil-lyn wasted her life chasing a man. Actually, Beastman would also get thrown into this category. He's completely obsessed with Evil-lyn, and it's very one-sided. She never comments on it, but she doesn't do anything to stop it either. It's just kind of odd. In the original, Beastman would try his own nefarious schemes, even without Skeletor, although he did often play the bumbling lackey, but here he's just singularly focused on Evil-lyn. That's odd. It just shows that the writers did not understand these characters at all. Duncan was all over the place in this episode. He's still good at fighting, and he still has to protect innocent people from bad guys, but when he's asked to save the world, he says that his hero days are behind him. Clearly that isn't true. Maybe he wants it to be true, but reality says differently. In the end, he doesn't get to be a part of the main plot, but at least they were smart enough to let him and Teela move past that whole argument thing. That was ridiculous. So those were our thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you find the portrayal of these characters empowering? Or do you think the original was more progressive like we do? We'd love to hear from you, so leave your comments down below. Thanks for watching, we really appreciate it. Before we go, we want to give a shout out to our members: Caleb Nelson, Subternia, Tyrant Carnivore, Adam K, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, Hunter Rose, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samru163, Kopitio Bozinski, Gabby Hime, Sandy Martin, Verdant Range, Butcher7 Actual, Dashhound, Bandito Bane, JVR, Hussyman42, and Nixel. Thank you all so much for your support. If you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That helps us out a lot too. And it's free. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye everyone. Bye guys.